Hi, everybody. So our title today is How Smart Leaders Create Engaged Employees. And when we look at engagement, it's the ability to really not only just take on the direction of the organization, but the heart of the organization. And I always think about engaged as being like engaging or being engaged with someone that you really care about. And just what happens in regards to that. There's a rapport stage. Maybe you take them out to the finest restaurants, maybe McDonald's or Burger King, or you might go a little bit higher than that, and you spend some quality time. And after a period of time of common ground, you start to feel like you're a part of something. And when you really think about that too, it's exactly the same for employee engagement. The more you understand each other, the more you know each other, the easier it is to be able to motivate and inspire others. And you know, as leaders, we've got to be able to do that. Now, I know my audience is probably either in supervisory or leadership positions or aspire to be so. And so I've been in this space for nearly 30 years. And I remember my first supervisor's role. I was only 19. I had 5 staff. All of them were older than me, and my manager pulled me aside and said, "Will, just a word of advice. Now that you are a leader, you need to keep your professional distance." And that was great advice, 25 years ago. Keep your professional distance. But the problem is with engagement, if you're distant, then what happens is you're not connected. And you probably all heard that saying, absent makes the heart grow fonder. Well, actually, it doesn't. It makes the heart forget you. And it's pretty much the same when we're looking at engaging our teams, because who are we trying to engage anyway? Do we go into work and say, all right, process, you can do it? No, we don't. We motivate and inspire people. And sometimes we forget that, especially when we're in roles where it's very project-driven and outcome-driven, process-driven. And we forget that a lot of the time, how to get people emotive and motivated towards finishing and completing projects. Now, they're internally motivated because they tend to be quite technical and want to make sure that they get the right things done to have the right outcomes. But we're not just intellectual beings, we're emotional beings. Most of our buying, when we buy things, intellectual but emotional is what pushes it. And so professional, yes, but just not distant. And so I've been in the space for Dale Carnegie, as mentioned, nearly well over 25 years now. And look, the experience that I've seen in interviewing well over 60,000 people, actually I've trained 15,000 just in my classes. And if I really looked at all the interviews that I've done over that period of time, it would be at least well over 60 to nearly 100,000 people. And in my little journey as a person who talked to business owners about their business and what made them passionate and engaged about what they do, the one thing that I really picked up is they had a love affair for what they do. And the really best ones really enjoyed making sure that their people were happy, content, motivated to do the job. Now, during that period, I also had the ability to work with a lot of top CEOs, and some of them just weren't good with people at all. In fact, if they could not deal with people, they were happier. But they had a good sense of finding people who were really good at that. They had a great energy about them. And the real smart leaders that I've worked with realized what their strengths and weaknesses were and played their strengths, and then they made sure that the weaknesses were carried through. But, like if you see, some of the great IT gurus, most of them did struggle with, that people connection. Zuckerberg would be one of those examples. And if you look at what his journey has been, and progressing in regards to his public speaking and his engagement, he's definitely got better and better. So it's something you can learn. So even though it might not be a natural tendency for you, it's definitely something we can all work together with. So let's just move ahead on a little bit on the objectives today. So we'll just find our visuals. Okay, so how to win friends and influence people. So igniting workplace since 1912. Yes, our organization's been around the same year that the Titanic sunk. And actually one of our clients is Hutchinson Builders, and they're also began its journey in 1912. And, for those who don't know the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, why it was such a transformational document was because a lot of people really struggled with how to connect and how to get the most out of others. Now, Dale Carnegie began his career, well, initially he was trained as a school teacher, and then he wanted to be an actor, actually. So he went to New York to join the theatre, realized he had to fund his acting career. So one of the things he was very good at was debating at university. And so he went to the local Harlem YMCA and started teaching people how to speak in front of groups. Now, mostly it was all men at that particular time, you can imagine, in 1912. Now, he was paid on commission, so every session that he would run each week, he had to be engaged. He had to create an engaged audience that wanted to come back the following week. And he was very good at it. And what happened as a result, business people would start to come up with other issues, like how do I get my boss to say yes to a pay increase? How do I effectively get my workers to actually do things rather than have to tell them? And so How to Win Friends and Influence People wasn't just a great book that was written, it was actually born out of the practicality of that classroom. And he started to write down some of the answers to some of the questions that his class members were coming up with. And in 1936, How to Win Friends and Influence People was first published by Simon & Schuster. Overnight, Dale Carnegie became a success, and the title became a success. And he also was a person who was widely criticized in his time for writing that book. But, it's still on the bestsellers list well over 80 years later. In fact, we're doing more business now as a privately owned company than any other time in the history of our 106 years. Why? Because we're now working in an environment today where people have to get more out of their resources. In fact, we call it the business reality. More, better, faster, with less. Are you working more, better, faster, with less timelines? Sometimes less people. Sometimes less finance to finance the projects. And so to get that real effectiveness, part of thought leadership or part of engagement is to get people on board. How do you do that if you're not great with people? And that's where How to Win Friends and Influence People has found its home, and millions of people have done the Dale Carnegie program. On our birthday in 1912, we started our birthday, our 100th birthday. We launched in 2012 Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People in the Digital Age. And that's just some of our class members, some of the corporates that we've worked with, giving real-time examples around how it's used online, how it's used face-to-face, practical, common ways of using the material. So just working on to our next visual. So redefine employee engagement from an employee perspective. So that's the topic I'm going to talk about today. How to access and define personal levels of engagement. Where am I today? Am I engaged? Looking at how to look at levels of engagement for my team. How can I encourage engagement in my team? Leveraging techniques for creating and maintaining employee engagement. Treat employees as valuable people with skills rather than as people with valuable skills. Dale Carnegie. So, in your mind, I want you to think about what does an engaged employee look like? If you've got a mirror, maybe have a look at that person, look them in the eye. Yeah, that's me. I'm an engaged employee. But what have you noticed about engaged employees? What do they do? Okay, how do they move? How do they meet people? How do they meet projects? How do they collaborate? What works for them? Now, if you're one of those supervisors and leaders, why does that work for you? And so let's just have a look at some of the jigsaw pieces to engagement. So one of the things I'd like you to maybe just contemplate is a definition for engagement. What would be your definition for engagement? Now, this is one definition that we've come up with, which is the emotional and intellectual commitment of employees to deliver high performance. So why emotional? Well, when we look at engagement from a personal point of view, it's two people who really care about each other, and why they're at that part of merger in regards to spending their life together. I always think about that too. I have a different way of spelling time. I spell it L-I-F-E. So when you really think about it, every time I give my time, I'm giving my life. I always think it's really awesome that two people can come together and give each that gift of their time in life. And when you really break it down, they've probably got 300 million other choices besides you, or maybe you can niche that market, but quite a lot of people they could have chosen. And the fact that they chose you to trade their time, their life with you is pretty awesome. Have you ever thought about this too? The people that are working with you on that project, that are spending all those hours, coming together, collaborating, they're also trading their time with your company, trading their time, their life with your team. So, and one of the things that I've learned in working with people is most people don't go to work to fail. They go to work because there's something in it for them. Now, it could be just a paycheck. That's level one, base level, which is just your survival. But in the IT space, project management space, companies that are progressing, organizations and governments that have a higher purpose, there's definitely an emotional reason why they turn up. We can intellectually stimulate them through giving them work and projects that help them to expand. But our key goal is how do we get that team to really perform at a high level? Maybe some of the things that we can talk about today will do that. So, which of the following has the greatest impact on employee engagement? So as I just go through it, maybe pick the one that you think really stands out for you. Are we able to run a poll, Beck?
Sure. So what I'm doing right now, ladies and gentlemen, is pushing out a poll to you. You have a few minutes to complete the poll. So have a think about what you think the answer might be. So we've got fair, competitive compensation and benefits. Do we think that could be a reason? Or could it be satisfaction with immediate manager? Support of work-life balance? Belief in senior leadership? Or is it opportunities for advancement? And then there is pride in the organization. And maybe the most important thing, Will, is free popcorn in the break room. What do you think?
Well, you've got those ice creams in your break room.
Yeah, and they're very, very popular too.
They're nice. Yeah, they are nice.
All right, so I'm just going to give the audience a few more minutes to put in their answer. And it looks like at this particular time, it's a really big mix at the moment, Will.
Okay. Wow.
Okay, so you've got another about 50 seconds left to go to put in your answer, guys. Love to hear what you think there. I know what mine is.
What is it?
Not sharing yet.
I'm going to see if the survey proves
I want to see what the audience thinks first.
Yeah. Yeah. We rolled the survey out, and so Dale Carnegie is in many countries. Actually, we're in over 85 countries now, and 9 million graduates of just the Dale Carnegie program. So a lot of our clients, 428 of the Fortune 500 companies, use us. And so this survey is placed in 3 continents, and then we get the feedback from it. And we look at market trends, and different countries might be subtly different, but the survey that we've done here is pretty much on cue for Australia and New Zealand.
Fantastic. Okay, so it looks like most people have actually submitted their answer. Just giving the last 14 seconds left, guys. 14 seconds.
14 seconds. That's impressive, Beck. You can do that.
Okay.
All right.
3 seconds left.
3 seconds.
And there we go. What we might do is show everybody the answers.
Oh, wow. Okay. So competitive was, yep, okay. And look, satisfied with the immediate manager. Look at that, that's high. Yes, in Australia we have seen that trend, which is supportive work-life balance. Whereas in other countries, actually America doesn't rank as high.
Really?
Because I think I have to get 6 days off in corporate America.
Well, maybe that's the reason why.
Yeah. Okay. Belief in senior leadership definitely is high. That's the other one. Okay. That's pretty consistent with our results. So I'll just go to the next slide. And this has been the trend that we've seen. I have to just, sorry, So here's the trend, which our audience has pretty much confirmed, except for the work-life balance, which I think from an Australian, and also I've worked a lot in New Zealand point of view, more from an Australian point of view, I think it's actually a really good element about our workforce, is that we do want to have both sides, that work-life balance. But when we tracked Canadian, American, European, Australasian audiences, here are the 3 key trends that came out. First one, and it was number 1 for you guys as well as an audience, was satisfaction with our immediate manager. Okay. I would love to, actually at this stage I'd ask you to raise your hand, and you can do that in your office. Raise your hand if you left your last job or your last position because you didn't get on with your immediate manager. Yeah, come on, Beach, not to raise your hand. And this is the number 1 area, and why? Because that immediate manager has such an impact on motivation, on satisfaction, of knowing where you're going. The next one was, just think to yourself, and some of you will have probably yes to both these, maybe you moved on because you just didn't have that belief in senior leadership. One of the things I've learned about leadership is you may have the title of leader, but real good leaders, they're leaders whether they're at work or not at work. Would you follow this person if it wasn't around that work environment? Would they be worthy of you, giving your energy to follow them outside of that work environment? And that's where we can start to really work on our own leadership skills. So we might have the authority, but good leadership is that ability to enlist that willing cooperation of people to achieve desired outcomes, not just based on those outcomes, but based on whether that person's trustworthy, whether that person keeps their word, and all those strong values that come around the leadership model. The third one was pride in the organization. Now, you'll find with millennials is that millennials, they do want it all. Like, they want to take their surfboard and they want to take their, iPad or laptop, and they want that work-life balance. And I was taking a course recently. It's called "What Got You Here Won't Get You There." It's a Marshall Goldsmith program that our organisation has an alliance with Marshall. Now, Marshall wrote the book "What Got You Here Won't Get You There." Recently, I was working with a really progressive company. They were in finance, and we had 52 millennials working with them over a weekend. And I know you can't see me, audience, but I'm actually 51. So working with 52 under 25, I was a little bit apprehensive about whether my communication was going to land. And it was one of the best projects I've done this year, and I've done some fantastic projects. But the reason why it was really good is because during the break, I would at least get 3 or 4 people coming up to me and asking me questions on how to communicate, how to engage. And one of the number 1 questions that they would start to ask me is, hey, well, I'm under 25. A lot of the time I'm feeling quite anxious about having conversations with people. I'm great at work, but, you get me outside of work. How do I do that effectively? I'm an introvert, and I don't really want to go and say hello to strangers, and I don't know what to say next, and how do I keep it going? And the other thing that I learned from them, they were learning a lot of the things that I've developed in my skill set, but more importantly, Dale Carnegie and their 106-year skill set. but I was learning off them. One of the things that they were teaching me about was how important multitasking was, roles not being boring, how important it was to advance in their career, see where they're going. And the number one thing that came through that particular group, and we have seen a trend globally, was purpose motive. They want a purpose. Now, I'm next generation, and so when you look at generations, one of the things I talk about is feedback. So if you're a baby boomer, born just after World War II, going into the workforce in the 50s and 60s, no news is good news at review time. Right? No news is good news. Everything's okay. If you're a next generation, just tell me at the yearly review. And by the way, everyone goes on about the Y generation. The Y is 37 at the top of their game. They're already leading stuff. No one talks about Y anymore. So what we've done is we've clustered the end of Y and put the millennials, and we've just called them millennials. And so with Y generation, hey, how am I doing? I told you last month. Yeah, that was last month. Yeah. What about millennials? How am I doing? I told you yesterday. Yeah, that was yesterday. A lot's changed. You want to see my Facebook feed? Everything's changing. So one of the key things about engagement is, who am I talking to? What language lands more effectively? Am I talking purpose motive when it was somebody under 25? Am I helping them understand the strategic vision of the organization? If I'm breaking down on a project, am I helping them see how their skill set's valuable towards the end of that project? When I'm talking about Y generation, am I giving the right feedback that's going to land with that generation? Am I respecting the X generation, boomer generation, in regards to the wisdom and the experience, and when things go wrong, what happens and how to handle that sort of thing? I'm loving this time back at the moment, because most organizations that are progressive have these fantastic generational intelligence coming together. But, like, if we don't know how to utilize all that talent effectively, then we can have a real challenge. So employee engagement is about making sure, if you're the supervisor, hey, how am I coming across to my team? And it's not about being liked, it's about being trusted. And am I helping my team stay connected to the project, stay connected with each other? Or am I hindering it? Is my lack of people skills getting in the way? With some temperaments, being straight works, but others it just doesn't. Am I connected to the senior leadership team? And have I bought into that? Because my body language is certainly going to emulate that long term. Do I talk about purpose motive? Do I create pride in the organization? So why is engagement important? So let's talk about that for a bit. Well, high engagement organizations outperform other organizations by 202%. So our stats are that a highly engaged employee is 200 to 240% more effective, more productive. Now, in your office, as you're sitting listening to this webinar, I want you to ask yourself this. Hey, how many of my team are in that category? Am I in that category? Am I highly engaged? Do I love what I do? Is that coming across? How many of my team do you think are highly engaged? And if I could improve those scores, what would that do? What would that do for my position? High engagement, 19% or higher shareholder returns. Now, for those who run businesses, at the end of the day, our exit strategy is to pass it on to someone who can run the company for us, create a board, and get our long-term return on investment for all our hard work. Can't do that without really strong leadership. And leaders are only as good as the people who have dialed in. If people have dialed in, they'll give you compliance, okay, but they won't give you full engagement. Engaged employees, lower turnover. People who love what they do, they don't tend to leave the organization as long as you pay them fairly. Some people will even stay with an organization for a long time, knowing that maybe remuneration will increase, but they don't want to let down their friends. So there's a lot of smart reasons why we should engage our teams. So Fully engaged employees stay with the organization longer. And I want people who are 200 and 240% more productive to stay with me. They contribute to the bottom line. They commit to productivity and quality, and that's just so important to any organization. Partially engaged, look, they concentrate on the tasks, not the outcomes. Hey, they want to be told what to do it, get paid, go home. Disengaged, or what I call hostages, in other words, they're hostile hostages, and they're not passive, by the way. They sow seed of negativity. That's proactive. They're proactively negative. They sabotage progress. Okay, and then they start to express mistrust, and that creates animosity in the team. So let's just have a look at some of the. Actually, that's not in there. So just going. I'll try and come back to that visual. We had some stats, but I'll give you the stats as I speak. Just want to go back if I can. Okay, thanks. So normally there are some stats that come up with it, but you might want to write this down if it is of interest to you. So globally, fully engaged employees that have been surveyed is around about 29% internationally for developed countries. So in Australia, we're a little bit better than that. We're 33% of employees engaged, surveyed by Connexa, which is an engagement survey company. Hey Group, Gallup also do the same sort of things, and there's a few other major players in their best places to work. So we're around about 33%, 33 to 36, depending on the survey. That's great news, Australia. That's great news that we've got 33% engaged. You know, highly productive. But what's the downside? Well, 44% are only partially engaged. Okay, so they're just taking a paycheck, and that's great because they're doing the minimum requirement for their job, and that's great. We get the projects done. But when it comes to innovation, they don't get involved. When it goes the extra mile, when things really get a little bit tougher, they'll probably prefer not to go the extra mile. So 23% are disengaged. In other words, actively telling people that they're not happy with the organization. Now, one of the things I talk about in our classes is, hey, did they become disengaged by design, okay, or personality? Sometimes our design of the way we have our workplace or the way the culture is, the way we treat them stuff, we help design disengaged employees. Sometimes it's not their personality. Sometimes it's both. And so when we're looking at a high-performing organization, we go, okay, what is the process? Is it supporting engagement, or is it actually stopping it, or is it just creating partially engaged? And so the processes and systems are important to the organization and actually how we talk to people. So key research findings, clients-facing employees have lower engagement levels. So in other words, when people are connected and they have that client-facing employees, engagement increases during the first 5 years, then declines or stagnates. So one of the three motivational factors that I've seen in regards to helping people stay connected past the 5 years. Now, Dale Carnegie wrote it in How to Win Friends and Influence People. He wrote, the need for water, food, and the basic parts of life is mammoth, it's great. But the need for being seen and what he called a feeling of importance is just as valuable as water, is just as valuable as food. And we all know, we've probably read the research that a baby that isn't given any love literally can die because of no love or contact or, reinforcement or edification of value. Look, I know people. Look, if I actually, and Dale Carnegie wrote this in How to Win Friends and Influence People, if you didn't feed your children for 5 days, people would certainly complain, and they would certainly do something about that. But I've met people for 5 years who haven't had a word of praise or recognition for what they do. So often we think it, we just don't say it. So one of the ways to get people past that 5 years and super engaged is creating a culture where we give positive feedback, where people are able to feel important, one, belong, purpose, motive, and the third one is the feeling of moving forward. we're creative beings. When we don't feel like we're moving forward, we feel like we're stagnating. When we stagnate, we actually use our creative energy and we implode. And after a period of time, that's when we start to go, hey, I need to probably make a different choice than the one I'm making today. Enthusiasm equals extra effort equals organizational success. Okay, so there is a bit of a survey that one of the specials that we'll do as a result of this seminar, Beck, is we'll create a opportunity for organisations maybe to tap into an engagement exercise that we do with organisations for 90 minutes, and we measure whether the employees are fully engaged. We also look at some of the skills gap analysis around that. So we've got some limited places, but we'll talk about that at the end of the workshop. So let's have a look at our next visual. So what are some of the ways as a leader or supervisor you can practically help your staff, your team members, to move into that top 33%? If you've already got people in that top 33%, congratulations, well done. The next part is keeping them there. So if you've got them in that top 33%, you're probably using a couple of key drivers. You're probably giving reinforcement of importance. You're probably helping them feel like they belong, so they'll go the extra mile for you. A lot of us don't tap into a feeling of moving forward as well as we could. And that's one of the things that we can do. Now, here's a question. How many of you drive to work exactly the same way every single day? You've got it down to 30 seconds early or 30 seconds late. The Beck's putting their hand up. And why do you do that? Do you know why you do it? Because you're smart. No one wants to go into work feeling anxious. In fact, if you've been driving more than 10 years now, I bet you don't even think about it. It's like, I'm home, work. Oh, it's like a time machine. How did I get here? And that's because the brain is such a fantastic mechanism. They reckon the subconscious mind works 30,000 times faster than the conscious mind. That's Ian Roberts, mind doctor. So that's where I got the research from. I don't know who clocked it. I don't know if I could clock it 30,000 times faster. It was pretty quick. But what it does say is that once we start to learn something and we're into behaviour, we're on automatic. We're on an automatic pilot. Now, the good thing about that is we create comfort zones because we then minimise anxiety. We're comfortable with the way we drive to work. We're comfortable if we hop on the train. We're comfortable in our job. We're anxious probably for the first 3 months. Will they pay me? Will they see me? Will they value me? All that stuff. And then finally, after 3 months, maybe we're starting to feel a bit more secure. And then maybe after a year or even earlier, depending on the role, they start to show that they've got, that they like us, that they can see some value in what we do. They maybe even promote us or put us in a leadership position. They give us feedback. We start to belong. We start to feel important. And we're engaged. All these areas, we stay within uncomfortable, comfortable, uncomfortable, comfortable. So if you really want to, especially that 5-year part, pushing people past that 5-year and immediately create a culture of engagement, remember that people are a divine dichotomy. They want both. They love their comfort, but they also want an adventure. And remember how I spell time, L-I-F-E? I don't know about you. We're not going to get out of this alive. So an adventure sounds great. It's common sense. Intellectually, from projects, getting things done, tasks done. I don't know about you, but I love that. Even cleaning my car. Like I got a messy car and I clean the car. It looks awesome. I look at my car and think, I did that. And that's a process, right? And then you've got that result, that immediate feedback. But, things like adventure, though. What's a stretch for me? How do I become better? So I'm working with a lot of top-end companies at the moment. One particular company I'm working with is Myland. They're an amazing organisation. And one of the challenges they have is they have incredibly smart people. And I've worked with a few other organisations. Oracle Labs has been a client of ours. And one of the reasons why they use us is because smart people need to grow. And a lot of organisations have a glass ceiling. You've got all these talented people working for this organisation. They all know they can't all be the leader. Some of them definitely don't want to be the leader. They just love doing what they're doing. But how do you keep them engaged? A feeling of moving forward, creating. So the first thing we look at is values. What are the values of the organization? Have I communicated those values? One of the things we do in our leadership training for managers program is we do an interview, not an interview. An interview will find out about you, but an interview is what makes Joe go, Joe so slow. If you're the coach, it's your job to know. And if you don't know, well, maybe you should know. Because when you think about, if I was a salesperson selling IT equipment, I need to know the processes, I need to know the hardware, the software, how it works, all the rest of it. That would be my role. But if I'm a leader and I'm selling the vision, the values, the purpose, motive of the organization, and I don't know my people and the way they think, their temperament, then I should. Remember, if it's not your natural temperament, that's okay. You can still find out and then utilize your team to make up for some of those shortfalls that you might have. So there are three things that, and three reasons why some of the top organizations on the planet Earth have done or been involved in Dale Carnegie. So some of our graduates are people like Warren Buffett. If you've actually got Netflix, you can see the Warren Buffett story, and there's a whole section on why he advocates Dale Carnegie. Now, we don't pay him because we couldn't afford him. He does that for free. And one of the things he got out of the Dale Carnegie course, Warren talks about it, is he asked his partner, his then girlfriend, to marry him. He didn't have the confidence to do that. He also mentions that if he didn't learn how to communicate, no matter what forum, his whole life would have been different as a result of that. And so, people like Michael Hill, who's a jeweler, Terry White is a graduate from many years ago, and some other organizations, many other organizations. Jack Welch is a graduate of the Dale Carnegie course. Why do they do it? Well, because they want to move forward. They don't want to just stay the same. And that's one of the traits of a good leader is their job is to make people feel like they belong. If they're good at feedback and coaching, that they're important. They also put resistance. In other words, performance or performance standards that just allows them to grow into uncomfortable, comfortable, uncomfortable, comfortable. And that third factor for really dynamic organizations makes a big difference. Are you inspiring? Now, a lot of time, because I'm working with teams within bigger companies, they'll go, hey, how's my team doing? Well, I always turn around and go, well, how are you doing, John? What do you mean? I ask you how my team is. Well, I'm just asking you how you're doing. He said, what do you mean? Well, aren't you a reflection of them anyway? Oh, I get it. Okay, yep, I understand. So when I know my team are working well together, what are some of the things that I'm doing to make that happen? When I know there's a bit of disconnection, what's going on? Is it process? Is it personalities? Am I dealing with non-performance quickly, or am I letting it fester? Am I good at conflict management, or do I let that go too? I'm sure with the people listening today, I've got a few A players, a lot of A players. And what do I mean by A players? I mean people who are just really passionate, full on, highly productive. 240% is nothing to them in regards to getting outcomes. Now, if you've got a group of them, that's fantastic. I know one thing about A players. A players get really hacked off when other people aren't coached to the standards they're expected to make. And the longer you leave that, the more hacked off they get. And so, and this is a trend I've seen big too. I've seen this trend of, I don't know if I want to go and tell them about that non-performance issue. I don't really want to get into an argument or deal with conflict. Now, this might surprise everybody that's listening today. The number one human fear used to be public speaking. Does that strike a note with anybody in the audience? Is public speaking something that you probably avoid? Beck, you've got your hand up. You've got two hands up. Yes, public speaking. Well, it actually got superseded about 3 years ago, according to Hay Group. The number one human fear now is talking to a human. Real conversations in real time, throw conflict in there. It's now the number one human fear, according to Hay Group. It was launched 3 years ago in Macau to our organization. And what's driven it? Well, actually, probably your smartphone. How much time do we spend on our smartphone looking down? And when you think about it too, when you say hello to someone and on their smartphone, part of you already knows the 50% there, 30% there. The brain is so fantastic. We process a huge amount of data each second. You know, when you watch a movie, it's 32 frames per second. There's a huge amount of data. Even in this conversation I'm having with you, I'm using a lot of words, which I'm not normally used to, by the way. It's usually interactive with Dale Carnegie. But if I don't communicate in a picture format, in some form of emotional content, people just basically do what you do with your feed on your Facebook. They just scroll past you. And if you think about your feed on Facebook or any social forum that you've got, how quickly do you go, yes, I'm going to touch into that and find out more? It's nanoseconds. And conversationally, a lot of the time too, it's pretty much the same. Unless people can bring some sort of impact, emotion, or picture, or some sort of purpose motive, we lose them. Now, we have this amazing amount of politeness with each other, where we look at each other and we smile, but we're not home. We're not home. And so one of the things we can do as leaders is, hey, remember that connection factor. You know, am I creating imagery? Am I allowing people to see into this world? Am I tying my language into their purpose? Do I know their purpose? What inspires you? Are you enthusiastic? Now, a lot of people meet me and they think I'm naturally enthusiastic. Well, I'm actually an introvert. I read a lot. I like my own company. I process through, you know, just being. And I don't use a lot of words for those who meet me outside of this presentation mode. I'm probably an introvert. But I realized as a leader that wasn't going to serve me. So I had to tap in the other part of me, which was the communication ability, to be able to help people understand what was going on in my mind and the company's purpose. So empowerment is to give people power for themselves. See, I'd rather have someone who's self-directed with high competency than having to micromanage them. If I have to micromanagement somebody, my A players aren't getting all the love that they need. The person who's being micromanaged continuously isn't really enjoying the experience. If it's you that's doing the coaching on the micromanagement, you're not doing what you should be doing, which is strategy and all the fun stuff, culture. So if we can move from value-based, build that confidence for people, confident people are more competent, find out what inspires, what creates enthusiasm for them, power them, and then what happens, we get an engaged workforce. So, disengaged, okay, so we need to look at value and creating those values within companies. We need to get people involved. We need to energize our communication. We need to be enthusiastic. There's a saying with Dale Carnegie goes like this: act enthusiastic and you'll be enthusiastic. Well, that's not genuine. That's not genuine. I'm acting. Well, you know, sometimes you just need to. Sometimes I'd rather have a fake smile than a sincere frown. And I actually had Peter, who was an IT project manager for a very large firm, and he said, look, Will, I don't particularly like people. I said, how many in your team, Peter? 50. And they know what to do. And I said, yeah. So what's going on? Oh, he says, they're pretty hard to deal with. And I said, well, okay. Well, look, Peter, and one of the things I have noticed in coaching you is you don't really smile too much. So I don't believe in smiling. I said, look, I'm not going to argue with you, but I would like you to do one thing. I'd like you to go into work, and I would like you to smile. I'd like you to look people in the eye, and I want you to do it from a conscious point of view. And I want you to even do it just because I've asked you to do it. Well, anyway, it was really interesting. He went into work, he did what I asked, he practiced some of the principles from Dale Carnegie, and Peter got a promotion after the course. What Peter didn't know, which I did know, was his managers were really upset with him because people were leaving, really talented, highly talented people were leaving, and they wanted to give him an opportunity to maybe make a performance shift. So he went from someone who was, which he wasn't knowledge that was privileged to him, from someone who may not have a job in that role anymore as a leader, to being promoted as a leader. So the process, sometimes you just got to work the process and let the heart follow later. So then we move into feel a sense of ownership and committed to ROI. So if you bring these elements together, we start to get a highly engaged employee. So let's break it down. Remember those 3 areas? What were they? Belief in senior leadership. In other words, making sure that the leadership is in line with, our team can be in line with that leadership strategy. So some of the things you can think about is communicate openly. Now remember that, professional, distant. You need to be professional. In this world, not distant. We didn't have social media when I was first a supervisor. We didn't have people that could look at your profile and see what your intentions were. All these things are brand new. And so distance probably not going to serve us. Ask for input, build trust. Dale Carnegie said, don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Okay, I'm going to ask my audience, have you criticized in the last 7 days? Have you criticized in the last 7 days, Beck? Yeah. Have you condemned in your spare time? Yeah. Have you complained in your spare time? Yeah, that's the first principle. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Why? Because it creates a negative energy when you're trying to build rapport. Smile. Give me a smile there, Bex. Give a smile. Actually, if you're in the room with me, Bex has this amazing smile. One of the things I talk about in the Dale Carnegie course is, what does a smile do? Well, actually, it releases dopamine. Who's got that? When you go on Facebook, you get that little thumbs up, like, dopamine download. All right? But, when you get someone who's actually physically in front of you, looking at you with a genuine smile, it's better than a dopamine download. Here's something else, too. A smile creates serotonin. Serotonin is produced in the stomach. Also, there's another thing called oxytocin. Oxytocin is a feel-good drug. So people smiling at each other, okay, feeling good about each other, actually stay together. So here are some of the other things. Satisfaction with your immediate manager. This is the one that I see the most in our famous Dale Carnegie course, which has had 9 million graduates globally. We run this program in-house, so we can run it with up to 30 people in an in-house situation. We also we're running a program today. It's a public program where people will come in. We do attract a lot of teams, and the number one reason is this one: satisfaction with immediate manager, supervisor, pending, or up-and-coming leader. Here's the first one: become genuinely interested in the other person. So we trained 500 people from a supermarket chain, and the number one for the 23 and under, number one is being genuinely interested. Be a good listener, show sincere appreciation. Pride in the organisation, here are some of the other key elements. Provide a fine reputation for people to live up to. Show you care, share success, exceed expectations. So here is how we gain engagement. Create a culture that encourages engagement. So are my people engaged? First of all, if you did a quick survey, our company would be happy to help with that, and find out what your score is. And then look at, hey, okay, now I know what my score. Measure the engagement periodically. Develop an action plan that addresses the disengagement, because it's not going to go away. It's there anyway. Hold managers accountable to improve it, but make sure you train them. I'm not saying it just because I'm with Dale Carnegie, but when you think about it, if you have a high-performing team, you don't cut training. So we've got Australia, we've got the World Cup coming up for league, and you don't cut training just before the Commonwealth Games. You increase training, recognise and reward progress. So engagement success keeps going forward. So next step for creating engagement is emotional and intellectual commitment for employees to develop high performance. So we're at our 45-minute mark. We're about right there, Beck. So you can check us out on social media. We have a white page around this topic. We've got we're going to be talking about a seminar coming up. It's on the 13th, isn't it? 13th. We're going to do a morning breakfast. So this has been one way. This is me talking. By the way, I'm pretty uncomfortable with just talking and not actually seeing an audience. If you came to our workshop, which is just 90 minutes, it's going to start at 7:30. And then actually 7:15 you can come and meet people. 7:30 we start till 9:30. So till 9 o'clock, 90 minutes.
That's right. So those are for the Sydney folks. So please come and join us by just jumping onto our website and registering for that particular seminar on the 13th of December. Now, what I might do now is, well, we actually had a few questions come through your presentation, so we might address them now, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
I do have one. Now, this is a question from me.
Sure.
Do you really think that leopards can really change their colours?
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a bit of a visual there with Warren Buffett. I'd hire him. I'd hire him to handle my accounts and my finance. Why? Because he's got experience around that, right? And I think about one of my friends goes to the Warren Buffett Summit every year in Omaha, and and he's been doing that for 10 years. And the one thing he always comments on is just the way he is always learning. Warren Buffett's always learning. He hasn't stopped learning. He hasn't stopped evolving. So when we talk about the age card, I really think that's old hat. I think it's about attitude and the ability to adjust to new environments. And Darwin said it's not the strongest of the species that will survive, it is the species that will adapt to its new environment. And look at our environment, When I was a kid, Beck, we had the Dewey. We're still doing libraries, the Dewey system, and you go and check out a
Dewey
book.
system.
Yeah.
It was different.
And what would happen is you just find out what number it is. To do a project for your homework took maybe an hour or two. My kids can do the same thing in 10 minutes flat. And my 11-year-old probably 5. He's just out of this world fast. He looks like the Matrix guy, right? And so our environment of change is just a constant. So I don't think it's age dependent. I think it's attitudinal dependent. So one of the things I would say is, if you are one of those people feeling like, I don't know if I want to change, or I don't know if I can change, you are anyway. Every single cell in your body is changing. Okay, the liver replaces itself every 6 weeks, I'm told. Do you like that idea? It's great. The problem is it has a memory of what it looked like 6 weeks prior. So we are constantly changing. All it is awareness. Once you have awareness, you start to change immediately. I reckon 50 to 60, just awareness. Forget about anything else. Don't do anything. Awareness helps immediately. Then you need a process that helps with behavior, shifts in behavior. And one of the things that Carnegie has really invested a lot of money in the last 10 years is sustainment. How do we sustain what we said we want? So those are the 3 areas.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Will. We've actually got a question from our audience, from Judy, actually. So she asks, do ways of engagement in Asia cultures, particularly China, different to Western cultures? Do we need to take that into consideration with these teams of mixed cultural backgrounds?
What an amazing question. Thank you. Our fastest growing market, like everybody else probably, is China. We're huge there. I was in Taiwan 2 weeks ago too, and one thing about Taiwan, they graduate 7,000 young adults. We're talking 13 to 16-year-olds through the Dale Carnegie course, which is massive. And then they had their adult classes on top of that, about another 10,000. I was talking to the franchisee, Pallavi is her name. 55,000 people go through a Dale Carnegie course a year in her territory. We run in Sydney, actually, we've ran youth classes. And one thing about the Chinese culture is that they really invest in their children. Children are so important to them. And I'm not saying it's not important to other cultures. It's just that when they're looking at, hey, how do I help my child have the best chances, it's just a no-brainer to them. They just invest. And so we've ran 100% Chinese classes. In fact, Stephen is going over to China to learn how to be a Dale Carnegie trainer and bring it into Australia for Chinese families. It's just such a big market for us. Now, when I'm working with big corporates, absolutely, it's the same thing. Why are they embracing it? Same reasons. They need people to feel connected. They need people to be able to get the best outcomes and the best results. So what we're finding, and because we're in over 85 countries, Carnegie has a process that really transcends culture. And I think the reason why that is because he's just talking one language, which is the human language. I want to be seen. I want to be noticed. I want to be spoken to in a way that isn't condescending, isn't controlling. I want to make my choices. I want to be a self-directed person within the parameters that the company's given me. Because when we think about thought leadership and when we think about education, and there are more honours degree graduates in India than there is people graduating in the US. Okay, and the phenomenal vastness of thought leadership and talent that's out there. Your ability to tap into EQ, emotional quotient, and tap into their IQ, intellectual quotient, and then collaborate on projects is just going to be more important going forward, not less. And we're not just competing locally, we're competing globally. So yes is my answer.
Judy, I hope that answers your question. Will, here's a curly question from the audience. Okay.
So, 3 minutes to go.
So this question actually comes from Divya. Not everyone is perfect, right?
Sure.
What is the best way to provide negative feedback?
Sure. You know what's worse than feedback? No feedback. And so one of the things I was working with an executive team. Actually, I was working with this executive team on Monday, Tuesday. There was 27 in the class. Successful people don't want to hear feedback a lot of the time. Why? Because they love to live in the illusion of their own greatness, and that's fine because they've earned it. The problem is if you can't give feedback, then people can make decisions on, a problem without that feedback, and that feedback can make that solution or that decision wrong and not good for everybody. So there's also one of the things that we talk about is don't shoot the messenger. And we do, someone gives you the message and they say, hey, here's the feedback, and you can take offense to that. So my point is that how to win friends and influence people creates an amazing formula that allows people to be more receptive to feedback. And I've noticed too that when you're more confident, and I don't mean outwardly confident that everyone thinks you're a superstar, I'm talking inwardly confident that you recognize who you are and you're okay with it. Then what happens when people give you negative feedback? It's okay, because you know who you are. You know what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. Now, if you're a person who's still developing into that and you're getting negative feedback, I always think, who's giving me the feedback? What's their intention? Is it there to help me? Is it there to help the team? If their intention is pure in regards to helping the team or helping others or helping me even, I take a deep breath in, I contemplate the feedback, and then I'll ask questions about it because I'd rather hear it than not hear it. Sometimes people will have an intention that isn't positive, but most people could probably pick that up with a little bit of analyzing of the situation. So my point is you've got to create a culture where feedback is accepted. You also got to realize how you deliver that feedback is so important.
Great, thank you so much for that. Divya, I hope that answers your question. So I've got another question. Will, you ready for this one?
Sure.
It's from Liz. So she asks, what strategies, action might help leaders or managers see the value of disengaged employees to develop the confidence, empowerment, and engagement?
Sure. So for a lot of companies that I work with, first of all, we're a transformational change company. And when we are dealing with businesses that want transformational change, the first thing I'm upfront with is, hey, this won't happen overnight. If you're looking for a quick fix, we're not the company for you. So we typically would write a 3-year strategy for larger organizations. Smaller organization, that happens really fast. You can move an organization within a year. And so the first part is that awareness, is just making sure the leaders are aware of it. They can see there's a cost for disengaged people. And look, a lot of companies aren't aware. They're just not aware. They just do what they've always done. They're in their comfort zone, and if they're making money, even less aware. It's only when they stop making money, profit, it starts to drop, margin starts to squeeze. They go, oh, what's going on? Oh, people don't actually like working here. Oh, okay. Then they'll start to see disengaged staff. Disengaged staff, did they get there through design? In other words, did we help create them, or are they truly disengaged? One thing that I've noticed with disengaged staff is actually they're still emotional. They're really hacked off, and they're telling their friends about being hacked off. That's emotional. You know, the tougher group is actually the ambivalent, you know, partially engaged. You know, the ones who are disengaged, you can actually bring them into engagement quite quickly by listening to them, finding out what they're trying to achieve, whether the process is working for them, whether they're being coached in the right way. But, the other thing is too, there's a real high cost though for disengaged that are not performing and are not going to perform. It's a huge cost for the organisation. You have to address those issues.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Will. Liz, I hope that answers your question. Now, Judy actually came back and sure. She asked, so what you're saying is, should we engage the same way with the Chinese culture and the Western culture?
Thanks, Judy. I've worked with a lot of Chinese companies, 100% Chinese companies, and it's interesting because one of the things that I've noticed is when I've been working with them is, yes, I agree, it's a little foreign in the beginning, you know. They certainly don't like hype initially, but once we start to give them the freedom of just seeing themselves in a different way, in a different angle, and we start to build confidence with them, my classes just tend to really be a fun place, and the growth is no different from any other culture. I've also trained around the world, so I've trained 100% Indian classes and so on. I see no difference. What probably needs to happen is you know, to understand how to approach, how to communicate. You have to sort of buy into it yourself as a leader, and then start to work it in and integrate it. Yeah, based on my experience, and I was with the franchisee for China only a couple of weeks ago, and in fact, he was talking about that very factor. We're finding that actually they're tending to embrace it more now because they are very much globally focused, not just locally focused. So my answer would be use the principles. I mean, the value-based anyway, you know, eye contact, communicate, listen. One of the biggest challenges, though, is really saying what you mean, but in a way that honors and saves space. You still have that principle, but you can do it in a way that really gets results. I hope that helps, Judy.
I think it did, and thanks you for the clarification, Will.
Sure.
Okay, now this is a very familiar name. So Dion used to work with us, and he asks us, what courses are available to help companies to enhance engagement, Will?
Look, the one that we're using the most is the world-famous Dale Carnegie course with 9 million graduates. It's different from the way we used to use it many years ago. We can tailor language around the company's initiative, use vision, values of the organisation. Look, we don't touch the essence of their product because it works incredibly well. We use modern language though, price of engagement. We use things like how to coach millennials, what are they interested in, talk in terms of the other person's interests, what does that really mean, and from a business perspective. And you know, many years ago, the class that I graduated was 14 weeks. We would meet at 6:30 and finish at 10 o'clock at night, and so that's not our format anymore. We have a 3-day format, and typically the whole company would go through it together, and then we would sustain it, and we would sustain it through other programs. So one of the challenges too, and here's the reason why we do it. Imagine that you had, you know, Wi-Fi in your office, okay? You dialed your phone in, and you wanted your staff to dial in the phone, but you had one number incorrect. What's the likelihood of them dialing in? Yeah, Zero, right? You go on a course, you're motivated, you go back and you start talking with enthusiasm about this new way of engaging, and people give you the polite look, but they're not dialed in. And so our company looked at, immersion. In fact, we call it the Dale Carnegie Strictly Business Immersion Program. We run that in-house. We have 300 different tools that we've developed over our 106-year history. We will listen to our clients, find out what their immediate needs, what the low-hanging fruit looks like, what the ROI target needs to be. So one of the reasons why a lot of companies engage with us is because they get a return on investment within the first 6 months and they're able to reinvest. And that way, both parties are kept accountable.